I'll try to be as short as possible. Some background. The whole idea of the deal of the century or unilateral annexation came as an American concept presented by President Trump during the last 3 years, but finally it became actual almost a year ago when he finally presented a kind of a plan. Now, the way it is perceived in Israel, and since, well, I have to say, I do not represent the majority of the Israelis. I'm not elected leader, so all my views are my personal views. But I think that it is acceptable by most Israelis that the concept of unilateral annexation was brought to Israel as a personal political interest of two political leaders, Trump on the American side, and it became his interest, again, this is an Israeli perspective, because he has to be elected and his base, the evangelists, coalition, communities are of course support most of them this idea. And on the Israeli side, it became a factor in our politics only during the elections. By the way, I have to remind myself that Netanyahu was totally against the concept of annexation. It was clear to him, he explained it many times during the last more than 10 years, that it is against the Israeli interest. Why? Well, there are several explanations. Probably he thought, and probably he was right, that what we are doing during the last 53 years, which is a kind of a gradual annexation and not perceived within the international community as unilateral, a kind, almost a violent annexation by Israel, is a better approach. But it became a part of his politics during the last elections, and since then, he, in a way, he did not stop to speak about it. And the public debate, public discussion itself brought us to a kind of a crossroad. When I say us, I mean Israelis. I think that Israel and Palestinians, but I'm speaking for the Israelis. After almost 53 years, we have to decide. And in a way, it is an opportunity or advantage of the plan that we understand today that we have only two options. One is 2 states for 2 people, which is not perceived as a very feasible option. And the other one is a kind of apartheid state. Israelis, we do not like the term apartheid, but it is obvious, and it was mentioned by Netanyahu when he explained to the Israelis what will happen to the Palestinians who will become or will stay in occupied or not occupied annexed territories. He said in a very clear voice that they will not get equal rights. So you can call it apartheid or you can call it any other term. It is not very important. We are laundering our dictionary in order to probably not to tell ourselves the truth. Now, again, second point, we meet this debate, this concept in a very complicated timing. In a way, if I should describe the Israeli and Palestinian societies today in the summer of 2020. It's two societies in deep crisis. I think that at least for the Israeli society, and I believe that for the Palestinian society as well, we are facing economic, well, first of all, we are facing the pandemic, the coronavirus. And in addition, like in many other places in the world, it is becoming a very, very wide or deep economic crisis. In our case, it is becoming a major political crisis and the feeling of lack of leadership. It is relevant to both societies. Now, the Israeli society and the Palestinian society are divided societies. When we speak about Palestinians, we see the drift between Hamas and Fatah. But when it comes to the Israelis, there are, in a way, three tribes: secular Jews, religious Jews, and our Arab citizens. Our president calls it a tribal society. Again, the definition is not very important, but it is a society, divided society, and the feeling of crisis is everywhere. People are going out to the streets because of the feeling of lack of leadership. Now, on top of it, we have to try to predict the scenario in case of a unilateral annexation. Now, in Israel today, since most people are busy or occupied with the jobs, we have unemployment of between 23 to 25%. It jumped from between 4 to 5% during the last 4 or 5 months. So most people doesn't care or do not pay too much attention to the Palestinians or to the political annexation. But when it comes to the Palestinians, again, the problem is not with annexation. We have to understand the annexation is acceptable by everybody. We shall annex in every future agreement between us and Palestinians when it will be part of the concept of swap, exchange of territories. We shall annex, and it is acceptable by the Palestinians, by the Israelis, by the international community. It was presented by all the leaders, Arafat, Abu Mazen, and all the Israeli leaders. The problem is with the new concept, which is the unilateralism. Unilateralism will be perceived by the Palestinians as an immediate Israeli attack. The Palestinians will see it as an act of political violence, and they will respond. Now, when we try to understand what will be the Palestinian reaction, well, it's very, very difficult to predict. Most Israelis will tell you, most experts will tell you, there is no energy within the Palestinian street, and in a way, they are right. This is what we see in most polls or research by Halishkaki. But we have to understand that they will face this Israeli political move when they feel, again, a crisis of leadership, economy, they are facing pandemic, and a lack of hope. Now, we believe, when I say we, Commander of Israel, and it is a result of a 2 years research with the best experts from all disciplines in Israel. And there are several scenarios. What I will try to describe now is the most likely scenario, the way we see it. In the beginning, we believe that we should see a light, what we call a popular opposition, a very, very low level of violence. It will start in demonstrations that will not be controlled by the PA, that in a way are diminishing or almost disappearing as a real formal administration. And the beginning of the terror or physical violence will be in many places in the West Bank when there are clashes, daily clashes between settlers and Palestinians in roadblocks on the roads or around the settlements. And, but it will not be a kind of organized terror. There will not, in the beginning, we do not think that there will be organization behind it. But the moment that it will start, there will be a kind of a competition between Hamas and Fatah. Who will lead it? Because when between 70 to 80% of the Palestinians will support it, and they support violence in all the polls. Even today, they came to believe that the only way to see the end of occupation is by using violence, whether they will call it intifada or they will call it jihad. It's just a question of a dictionary that both parties are using. And this competition will lead to a different kind of terror, which will be a kind of an organized terror, which means a terror actions which are supported by ideology and logistics by organizations, something that we have been experiencing during many years, during the 90s and the beginning of this century. Israel will have to react, the IDF, and the reaction will create more violence, and sooner than later we shall see a phenomena that we shall call a kind of a vicious cycle, which is which will demand a very, very violent reaction by the IDF. And we believe that Israel will find, we will find ourselves conquering again the cities, and in a way what started as a partial annexation will end as a full occupation or annexation of all the West Bank. Now, it will bring again to ongoing or never-ending violence, because Palestinians see themselves as people. They demand freedom, whether we Israelis like it or not. Most Israelis do not accept the idea that Palestinians are people, but in fact, they are people, and we are not fighting terrorists today. We will find ourselves fighting a people, and they will not surrender. They will not raise a white flag. Now, they do not have the power to conquer Israel, or I don't know, to kill thousands of Israelis, but they will use terror the way they did in the past. This is the scenario that we see for the near future. Now, before finishing, let me say, I said nothing about Jordan. I said nothing about Egypt. Our assumption, our prediction is that Jordanian king will have to react, not because this is his interest. His interest, the way the king sees the interests of Jordan, is to maintain good relations with Israel. He needed from the economic, security, political, and international interest. But it is not very important, because in this case, we have to understand that most experts and most leaders, political leaders, are doing the mistake, and they measure our relations with neighboring states by the relations that we have with leaders, with the leaderships. It is a huge mistake in the Middle East. In the Middle East, relations should be measured by the feeling in the street, because at least since 2011, the Arab Street in Tahrir Square in Cairo, in Jordan, in a way where we saw what happened in Syria, and in a way even in Saudi Arabia. It is not a mistake that the Saudi prince or the Saudi king or the Egyptian president or the Jordanian king did not visit Israel. Did not visit Israel. The last visit, by the way, was by Mubarak during the funeral of Rabin many years ago. So it is not a mistake because they understand that the street in their states, the societies, will not give it legitimacy unless we shall show progress on the Israeli-Palestinian threat. So our relations with our Arab states, our neighbors, we shall lose some of the good relations, and I'm trying to see it not as many of my friends see it. Some people will still believe that the king in Jordan might even announce that the peace treaty will stop. And again, in the Middle East, we are empowering Iran and Turkey. This will be the regional powers who gain support in the Arab street, because they are perceived as those who are defending the interest of the Palestinians against all the administrations in Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, who couldn't care less. So the question that I did not answer is that, in a way, it sounds apocalyptic, but again, there are several scenarios according to our analysis. This is the scenario that most likely to see. And the question why Israelis do not understand it. Most Israelis, again today, especially today, are worried with their economy, coronavirus, and our political crisis, and couldn't care less. They don't think about it. And in addition, I'm sure that all of you read Barbara Tuchman, The March of Folly. It reminds me those societies who saw it happening, but did almost nothing in order to stop it. And most important, our identity. The moment that we shall find ourselves conquering again or annexing the West Bank, this is the end of Zionism, at least if when we say Zionism, we mean Israel as a secure, Jewish, and democratic state in the spirit of our Declaration of Independence. Thank you for the question. Frankly speaking, we are doing almost nothing. I'm not speaking for my government. Again, as you can understand, it's clear that I do not represent the policy of my government. So the question is, in a way, for us, for me, as a kind of a civil society. Now, in the past, we didn't do it in England. We did it in America. When I say we, years ago, almost 20 years ago, wow, time is running, when I ran with a very good Palestinian friend, Professor Saim Seiba. I was before my political experience, and he was still the president of Al-Quds University, which is the largest Palestinian university. We came with a kind of initiative in order to get signatures to 6 parameters of possible future peace agreement, and we met thousands of Muslims and Jews, mainly in America. I think that I was in England only twice, but in America, and I remember that when we came to Chicago, we met about 2,000 people in the auditorium, and almost half of them were Muslims, and the two leaders, a Muslim and Jewish leaders, organized it, and they said this is the first time, you know. They told us, look, until now you exported your conflict, and it is for the first time that you are exporting your agreements. So in a way, this is exactly what you are, Hannah. Okay, this is I think something for you to do with us. I will be very, very happy to try to meet Muslim leaders whom I have no contact in England. So if you will be able to organize something, I will be more than happy. Today, you know, since we can't fly, so it became very easy. Look, it's a very good question, because I'm not sure that I have a good answer. This is my definition to a good question. So the way I see it, the major event, in a way that will create a huge impact on the topic that we are discussing now, will be the elections in America. If I do not have, I do not vote in America. Just a moment, the sun here in Israel, it's a little bit. Sorry. I think that if there will be, if Biden will be a president, so it's a new ballgame. And well, I'm very honest. I hope that this is what we shall see. It is not very politically correct to say it, but anyhow, I believe that if there will be a change in America, there are many of us, on even within our administration, that we shall find ourselves, we shall have to reassess, we as Israelis. And I think that some ideas that we discussed, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago, which is a kind of how, or can we, I believe that we can we create a reality of two states in a gradual process, a regional process, with the support of the international community? And the major idea behind it is, if we know more or less where we are heading, and I believe that we know, because the international resolutions 242, 338, and the Arab League initiative are all the same. They are very, very close to Clinton ideas, to what was agreed between, anyhow, so, and it is acceptable by most societies. So we can independently, for example, to say, okay, since we understand that in the future, on the east of the security fence, it will not be under Israel sovereignty. So we shall pass the law of voluntary return of settlers. Only those of them who want. According to our polls, by the way, 30% of the 120,000 Israelis who are living there, because the major settlements will be annexed in any future agreement. Again, it is acceptable by Abu Mazen, by the Americans, by the international community. But there are still many settlers. 30% of them are will be returning immediately if they will be compensated. And we don't need the permissions of the Palestinians in order to do it. And in a way, if we shall say this is a step in order to enable future negotiations based on the Arab League initiative and the international resolutions, it will be perceived the way, not I see it, I know it by the Palestinian administration as a very, very positive step. So these are examples, but again, it is very, very difficult to predict. I think that if we shall not see anything in America, or there will be no, should I say, international initiative, we shall go back to a gradual annexation. This is the reality that we have been facing during the last 53 years. And the way I see it, it is not much less dangerous than unilateral annexation. I think that the most, probably you did it already, but, and forgive me if I don't know, I think that England and Europe should recognize the state of Palestine. To recognize the state of Palestine and to not to give an order, but to say we recognize the state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel, We ask or we demand for the Israelis and the Palestinians, Israeli administration and Palestinian leadership to sit and to agree on the route of the border. That's it. And I think that this is something that you are not paying anything, you are not doing something against the future of Israel in the eyes of most Israelis. You are not doing something against, I believe, I'm not expert, the eyes of most Jews all over the world or in England. I think that it is a dramatic, it is only words, but those states, if you can influence on America, on the future American president, meaning the Security Council, to accept formally the Palestinians or Palestine as a state, a formal state to the UN, it will be a major achievement. By the way, I believe that it is more practical and than sanctions. Sanctions are, I'm not in a conflict of interest, but Israelis, when we hear sanctions, those of us who believe that, well, there are many Israelis who believe that all the world is against us, and everybody who is saying something against Israel or our policy is anti-Semitic. Many of us believe that this is, you know, the DNA of the world, of the international community. So they will see sanctions as something that we have to confront. And maybe the Israeli reaction will not be the reactions that we expect. So it's very, very difficult to predict. Well, first of all, when it comes to Trump, again, it's very, very difficult for me. I'm not a very good, or my expertise is not, I don't see myself as a political analyst, so I'm very careful about it. And in this specific case, Trump, he's a very complicated human being. So usually the psychology department in my family belongs to my wife, and she is not here. But the way I understand Trump, it came as a political concept. He tried to persuade people in order to vote for him, Jews or Christians, and in a way it worked. Now, when he presented his plan, his assumption was, and this is something that I know because I met some people who advise him, they do not understand the Middle East. And they did the same mistakes that many of us are doing every day. And they spoke to leaders and administrations. And leaders and administrations, they came to believe that the Arab response will be, well, they will not like it, but they will live with it. So it was a huge surprise for people around Trump when the Arab League said in a very clear voice, immediately after the plan was presented, that we are totally against it. Now, in a way, the voice of the Arab street is the voice of the Arab League and not of the Arab leaders when you meet them in discrete places. Now, once the Arab League announced, leaders, they have to follow. Now, the discussion or the debate between the people around Trump started immediately because Kushner, on one hand, he doesn't want to go on with the plan unless he will feel that there is, even if not an Arab support, there will be no Arab resistance or opposition. So he, in a way, he stopped. And on the other hand, of course, the American ambassador in Israel, who is a great supporter of settlements and donated a huge amount of money to build more settlements, he wanted to annex immediately. Second, he understood, or they understood 2 or 3 months later, that Israel, the Israeli administration, do not have any intention to accept the plan. They understood, took them some time, they do not understand Israelis and they do not understand the Palestinians. They suddenly were surprised to understand that Israelis do not think that it is a good plan. I mean, our administration, we just want to take one part of the plan, which is the unilateral annexation. Israelis do not believe in a Palestinian state. Bibi do not believe in Palestinian states. And his party do not believe in a Palestinian state. And within the Trump plan, there is a Palestinian state. Not a state that Palestinians can agree to, but a Palestinian state. Now they found themselves that Israelis are against the plan and Palestinians are against the plan. So I think that it is very, very difficult what they will do. But I think that this is what happened during the last several months within the American administration. When it comes to the Iranians, unilateral annexation, if you ask me, is the dream of the Iranian regime. In one moment, the international community will forget Iran. Iran will not be perceived as the enemy in many of our neighbors, which is perceived today, because suddenly the violence, instability that will spread over to Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, probably even Syria and Lebanon, Israel will be the major enemy of the Arab world. And people will forget Iran. And I didn't mention Arab communities or Muslim communities in London, Paris, or I don't know, Chicago or Detroit. So I don't think that Iran does not have to attack us. Iran has a much better weapon. Iranians are using proxies. They will use Hezbollah, and they will use Hamas, and they will use some other fractions of other Muslims, radical movements, in order to penetrate and in order to use terror. They don't need to attack. and they will be behind it. They will finance, they will take advantage because they will say that this is a just war because Israel is the enemy. Look, as the only Jewish community whom I believe that I'm not an expert, but at least I have the chance to meet. I spent 2 years in America, in New England, but okay, I met Jewish communities all over America, in the West Coast, and I don't know, all over America. And I'm not sure that it is the same in England or in Europe. In America, we are losing the young Jewish youngsters, because at least in America, the young Jewish students, most of them believe in liberal ideas, and we are losing our liberal identity. We are losing it by the way we understand the whole concept of Judaism. We in Israel, in a way, our Judaism became politics. We recognize politically only the orthodox concept of Judaism. We do not agree politically on any other interpretation of Judaism when it comes to our parliament and when it comes to our government. I think that the unilateral annexation will be a major step in the wrong direction. It will not be the beginning, because we see this tendency during the last 20, 25 years. By the way, during the 90s, it was totally different. I think that the atmosphere, when we in Israel and the world thought that we are really trying to create a different future, to create a future of two states in which Israel will be a Jewish democracy, side by side to a Palestinian state. It was totally different atmosphere, first in the region, our relations, not only with Arab administrations. I visited Jordan, I visited Cairo and Alexandria, and in the streets, we were accepted everywhere in Turkey. And today, of course, the atmosphere is totally different. And I believe that among Jewish communities, I think that again, it is not something new, but it will be a major step on the wrong direction.